evening to all of you, and welcome back to Friday at 5, the 17th episode of this program, where we discuss issues that are important in education, and we discuss it at a level where we gain a better understanding of what we need to do in the future. Today's topic is really close to my heart. It's about school cultures beyond 2021. School culture is sometimes defined as the hidden curriculum because it impacts almost each and every aspect of a school. There's hardly anything that remains untouched from a school culture. Uh, it's one way of saying how we do things here. Every school has different ways of doing everything, right from pedagogy, assessment, teacher-student interaction, teacher-parent interaction, and everything else, even the school assembly, annual day. There's a way that is unique to every school, and that is the reason why school culture is unique to every school. We are looking at 2021. We in March. Uh, Actually, the year ended in March 2020. We have, although we have struggled a lot, but we have only been disrupted. The way we knew schools in 2019 is not what we are experiencing right now in education. And in 6 months, the amount of changes that have happened in the lives of every student, every teacher, every school leader, and every school is amazing. Nobody would have dreamt of this on Valentine's Day, 2020. So without any love lost, I think we all are hoping for a better 2021. But deep down inside me, I feel 2021 is going to be more challenging because sometimes after a flood, when the gates open, there's a big rush that happens, and the effect of the tsunami is obviously felt after the wave has gone back. So we don't know right now. We are in a state of uncertainty. Yes, we are hopeful things will be better, but one of the things that are most definite to change is the culture of a school, the school culture in the future. And to discuss various aspects of it, we have uh, three leading experts in different domains. And before I introduce them to all of you and start this conversation, let me just go slightly back to the NEP. If we look closely on into the national education policy, it has three distinct objectives that it wants to fulfill. The first, it wants students to appreciate the rich culture and heritage of India, because people somehow are becoming modernized faster um, than maybe they should have been, I guess. I'm not going to bring in my own personal views, so I'm going to be an objective moderator. So that's one of the objectives of the NEP. The second important objective of the NEP is to create students, to create, transform students into responsible citizens. They should understand the Constitution. They should understand their duties towards the community, towards the society, towards the country, and also towards the larger human race. They should be, uh, you know, sensitive towards environmental issues, towards protection of animals, and they should not live a selfish, self-centered life in a very typical manner. And the third very important objective that the policy wants to fulfill is that instead of rote learners and knowledge grabbers and accumulators of information, we want problem solvers. We want people who have competencies and skills, and they can solve problems, and that can happen at a very young age. So these are three aspects of NEP which are very crucial. And I was reading a quotation which said, and I'll leave it to you to guess whose quotation it is, that vision without implementation, without execution, is delusion. So that's the quotation. Vision without execution is delusion. Now, we can always say that because it's a government's policy, therefore the government should be executing it. But that is not true. NEP can be executed only if every teacher executes NEP in the classroom. There is no other way. Because teacher at the end of the day is in contact with the student who's the real consumer of education. So if the teacher is not equipped to bring about that change, no policy can actually work to transform. We can change examination papers, but then we need to change the attitude and the mindset, which is very important, which happens in the classroom. So these are some of the aspects we will be discussing over the next 1 hour. Um, and if you have any questions, do pose in. Let me quickly begin by introducing our guests. We have Mrs. Revati Srinivasan joining us from Mumbai, Maharashtra. She is the Director Education of Singhania Schools and also the principal of Shrimati Sulochna Devi Singhania School in Thane. And under her leadership, the school has been rated as one of the top 5 schools for the last 10 years. So I think that's a huge accomplishment. And she believes in creating a culture of excellence, compassion, and trust among all stakeholders. We are very privileged to have you, Revati ji, with us today. Thank you for taking out the time. We also have with us Mrs. Anita Sharma. Mrs. Sharma is on the Governing Council of National Council of Education, Research and Training, NCRT, as we all know it. She's also the National Coordinator of Bharatiya Shiksha Board, and she has also been serving as the principal of SD Public School in Delhi. Thank you, Anita ji, for being with us. My third guest does not really need an introduction in the world of education. Um, I sometimes take the liberty of calling him the Amitabh Bachchan of education. Mr. Bala Subramanian, uh,
Thank you, all of
it's, I
you.
don't know, I don't have enough words to really tell all of you what he has done. But let me tell you that if you read his blogs, if you read his posts, he's one of the most futuristic um, school leaders or leaders in the school community. And his vision, right from the time when he was the director academics at CBSE, has been guiding a lot of schools. A lot of us who have white hair are his students and have been learning from him for so long. So thank you, Balaji, for again joining
Thank
us.
you, Atul.
And those who are not aware, he's also the chairperson of the board of advisory of ICSL, and we are very proud to be guided by him throughout this journey. So with that, let me start and take off this one question from all of you, which I'll give you about 1 minute or 2 minutes to speak your heart out. My first big question is, how do you see the culture of schools in 2030? Let's go 10 years ahead. In 2030, how do you envision the school culture uh, depending upon the changes which the blended learning or the NEP is talking about? So I'll give it to Revati ji first.
A very good evening to all of you, and thank you, Atul, for inviting me. I think I see a very, very progressive, I have a very progressive view. And I really see that from this culture of teaching that we are in, I think we move to a culture of learning. So you will see students pacing faster in their learning component, and therefore it's going to be a culture of learning even for teachers. Because if that doesn't happen, they're going to be way behind the students. So I think building this culture is very, very important. And therefore, it is a responsibility of every school leader to build a culture of learning in their schools. For all of this, it's very important for us to note that the mindsets have to change, and mindsets don't change in a short span of time. So, working on that is going to be the primary responsibility of every school leader. And I think the NEP has come in at the right time, at a time when we are seeing the change happening, and just when this particular period of a challenge that has come to all of us. It's kind of an eye opener and sort of gives you a guidelines for the journey ahead. What we are going to see is self-directed learning. We're going to see students being able to manage a lot of their own learning. There'll be a lot of personalized learning that can happen. There is going to be diversity in the classrooms, and that diversity, the students and the teachers will have to cope. And of course, there are going to be a lot more connections not just within the school system, but outside the school ecosystem. And that's something that one has to take. It is going to be a focus on building relationships, not relationships within the school and stakeholders within the school, but also among schools. So it's going to become an educational space as such, as I see it, where there has to be more collaborations between schools and work together for more innovations in pedagogy and assessments. The third that I can see is there will be a lot of student teacher motivation that's going to be required. And we have to be motivating them constantly. We have to address this as a challenge for us, because at this moment of time, the levels of motivation can be so different. So we need to bring them on par with them. We need to set very clear boundaries by the way of time limits and what we need to achieve, and set very specific expectations by the way of our goals. And I'm talking about goals as learning goals that we may have. And of course, it's very important for us to sort of infuse into our school's culture an element of uncertainty. And how do we mitigate that uncertainty? That's very important. So, building trust and faith between the stakeholders, between people, parents, children, students, teachers, everyone is very, very important. We all live under the assumption that we've done all this for so many years. We'll continue to do it. It's not going to happen that way. This disruption is a huge eye opener for each one of us, that it's time for us to change the ecosystem, the education pattern. It's giving us an opportunity to look at education differently, not look at education as equal to qualifications. And I think the day we start seeing it beyond qualifications, I think we're going to make great progress in the field of education.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very well said. I think you have jotted down a lot of relevant points, and I agree with you that it's a learning curve not just for students but also for teachers. I think we'll have to learn a lot moving forward. Anita ji, your views on what do you think would be the culture in school culture in 2030?
Thank you, Atulji, for inviting me and to give me opportunity to share my views about this. Revati ji has almost covered everything, so I was just thinking when you set the context for this talk, you talked about the vision of the National Education Policy document, and this talks about the education deeply seated in the Indian roots. So I was just thinking that as per our Indian thought, the basic aim of the life is raso vaisa, that is to pursuit for the happiness. And this pursuit, this conscious pursuit for the happiness, it has led to our ancient seers to the discovery of the discoverer, and that means they try to find that delight in establishing the harmony within the word which is within and the word outside. And in that they came to the conclusion that whatever we do, it should be with the spirit of well-being of all. So the concept of sarve bhavantu sukhina has come. And during this COVID time, we all have realized this, that the well-being of everybody is very, very important. And this well-being can be maintained only when we are conscious about our surrounding. We are full about, we are concerned about everybody who is around us, be it the nature or the human being or any other species. So only then the world can come to it can become a better place. And if we go by this philosophy, then we also need to understand that uh, to uh, to develop every human being as a socially inclusive and environmentally conscious and um, a concerned global human being is the prerequisite. And for that, everybody's potential should be there should be an effort in the direction that everybody's uniqueness can come out. And if we really want to do that, then obviously we have to nurture the students in a way that where they can find the space to ask question, where they are free to raise the questions, to challenge the existing traditions, beliefs, to express themselves, their own creativity, their originality, and they are also ready to take the ownership of their own ideas. So I think the schools will have to build a culture where the teacher taught relation will not be in the same way as we are having, that it should not be a unidirectional. It cannot be the instructional method which can be followed in the school. So there should be a proper dialogue between the teacher and the student. And as Revti ji has rightly pointed out, that a culture of trust and faith need to be built, because unless until that faith, the child can repose in the teacher, and understand, and the teacher is also ready to take the challenge which the child is posing in front of him or her, and is not taking it otherwise. So that kind of open culture, where the discussion, there is a space for lots of discussion, debates, arguments, this kind of culture needs to be created. And of course, if this kind of culture can be created, the children can be they can be diverted in the direction of being the critical thinkers and the good problem solvers. So rest all, I think Revti ji has already added.
Well, thank you so much, Anita. I think very well put. That it's important for all of the students to see themselves as part of a very larger domain, the domain of environment, nature, other human beings, and relate to them and do things which are beneficial not just to them but to the entire society. And we are going to be digging more deep into some of the elements, because all of you would discuss, how these can be done by school leaders, not just what needs to be done. But before that, I'll bring in Balaji to share his views on what he sees the school culture of 2030.
Well, thank you, Atul. And, I have heard entirely two different dimensions of the perspectives of your question. One purely on a pragmatic side, the other on a philosophical side, and the spiritual side. Well, if I put them together, what I see that by 2030, we are going to have a culture for managing conflicts, right? Because the whole thing is, if you look into the early cultures, both Indian and the Western, the dynamics of learning has always been to facilitate a human from I to we, right? We started from the individual consciousness, and then we moved into the family consciousness, and then we moved into a larger family, namely the community and the nation and the global. And therefore, you have enough evidence both in Indian education and the Western education where this dynamics has been well articulated, right? But then what has happened over the years because of a very consumerist attitude attitude, which led more to individual gratification and what do you call, seeking, unfathomed oceans of knowledge as fulfilling to the human desires. You have found that we have gone into the shell and what do you call, we have all, engaged in a process of, limited learning and learning to live with, with fear, learning to live with inadequacies, and therefore creating a hunger in ourselves for what is not available. And I think that is one of the challenges. My argument can be supported by a very interesting book which I had read in the recent past by Patrick Dixon, who said it's called, the future of almost everything, right? And defining the future, he equates it with every single word. F for fast, U for urban, T for tribal, U for universal, R for radical, and E for ethical, right? And he says the entire campus of, corpus of knowledge will be, articulated by these needs of society and the globe. Okay. So what has happened over the years that our schools have promoted, the individual fulfillment and thereby promoting consumerism and competitiveness, thereby the beauty of life, as Anita ji pointed out, in terms of the happiness, the search of happiness as the fundamental to learning has been marginalized to what is called data and information. We used to say from wisdom we move to knowledge, knowledge we came to information, and information we come to data. And even now data is also not required because that's already available in your Google and whatnot. So what that you need is that the human, the individual learner is absolutely in a trauma, not knowing what he should do about the process of learning. So what is that is going to happen in 2030? Probably social compulsions will force education to re-engineer and rehabilitate themselves, right? And you will have to, what do you call, balance between, the individual need and the social need. In literature, normally we used to talk about, articulation of a poem or a language or a story in terms of either it is idealistic or it is rationalistic over there, which is good. Rationalism is a reality, idealism is a vision, and that's exactly the problem with education, whether you want to be radical or you want to be ideal. But I think, we used to say, yatharthonmukha adarshavad. That's what we used to say, right? So, adarshonmukh yatharthavad, I would put it this way. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. But a conflict is going to happen between these two. And our schools probably will have to redefine the role of, as Revati ji pointed out about moving out from examinations, moving to the research of knowledge, moving to empowerment of skills over there. I think the focus of 2030 will be that you won't be validated by authenticated by a degree that you possess, but by your emotional intelligence, by your competencies on hand, and that's going to be the future. And I think in most platforms I used to say the role of schools is going to be like a knowledge cave, right? Where students come and have a cup of coffee, discuss and share their views, and then go back and engage in self-learning and self-discovery. And that's 2030, and we have to get ready for that.
Well, I think you very nicely put it all together, and I'll take a cue from what you've just said about management, and that's going to be one of the things that we will have to deal with the future. Now, one of the conflicts that I've noticed sometimes in schools is about, being westernized and being Indianized. So there is a huge conflict that sometimes gets created, that a progressive school is a school that has adopted Western values, or is progressive school a school that has gone deeper into the Indian body of knowledge? That's a huge conflict that happens. Now, when you go to countries like Singapore, Singapore started, I'm sure all of us are aware, they started something called SAP schools. Yeah. And these schools were started, to promote Chinese culture in the schools. When you go to Finland, you see the environment or the culture in the school in complete harmony with the environment in the society. Okay, but when we look at our schools sometimes, then the school culture which is within the campus seems to be very different from the culture that is prevalent in a child's home. So there is already that conflict coming in, because a small boy or a small girl coming from a small town in Haryana, going to a so-called international school with air conditioning, there is a huge conflict that happens there. So what Anita, what I want you to just give us your thoughts slightly on how important is it for us as schools to connect with our culture first of all, and then how do we actually do it in the schools. I think let's assume for a minute that people would stay divided on two sides of this conflict, but those who want to do it, how should they go about doing it? And maybe you can also touch upon some of the things that the Bharatiya Shiksha Board is trying to accomplish as a new board, and why do we need a new board. So Anita, over to you. About 5 minutes or so should be good enough to answer these three simple questions.
They are the most difficult questions to answer. uh, but
Well, that's
anyway,
all the time we have.
the conflict is maybe there, and it may always be there, because most of the things, most of the time it depends upon the parents' perception that when they are sending their child to a particular school, then what is their objective of sending the child. uh, it is true that we define our national goals and the school defines their curriculum in the light of the national goals only. But then there is a separate agenda which is going on in the parents' mind. And I don't know whether I should say this or not, but this happens that earlier we were setting the goals of the education or the on the basis of like there were the four goals: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So that means know yourself, know your prakriti, know your nature, and then start learning accordingly. So in that case, the learning was self-directed, and child was having the freedom of doing what he wanted to do for whatever the passion for the subject he has a passion for, he can pursue that. Now here what happens is that the dharma is left on one side and earth and calm. How my economy, how my finances can be affected, and then how I can fulfill my rest of the desires during my life. So those two things they have overtaken, and the dharma and the moksha they have left aside. And I think the most moksha part, which we were used to say sadhya ya vimukte, so that is now somewhere has left. So anyway, the whole purpose of talking about the Bharatiya Shiksha Board, or if you see this new education policy, when it is focusing again and again on bringing back the Indian traditions and Indian culture, the purpose is that to uh, to make the child self-directed learner and to give him the freedom uh, to innovate and to experiment with his own ideas. So that kind of freedom, when will be given to the child, the kind of the cultural disparity which is creating in the society, somehow I think this can be bridged. What is happening right now, because the schools they are working in a particular system, and the family atmosphere is entirely different. The language which is spoken there is not being used in the schools. So the gap between the family and the school is increasing. Child is always under the conflict: what is my reality? Is this the reality which is being followed at home, or is it which is being told at the school? So he is always in the phase of the conflict, and that is why the lots of because they are not able to bridge the gap, they are not able to understand the difference. So lots of problems of the depression and the anxiety and the other things, they are cropping up, and we don't know how to find their solutions. So every day we are trying to frame some new kind of curriculum. Now the life skill is required, now this is required, and that is required. So if that bridge between the family culture and the school culture can be reduced, then I think that is going to bring a positive change in the child's life, in the sense that he will be able to understand that the experience of his parents and the knowledge of his parents is not redundant, and they will be well respected in the in that premises where I am going to acquire more knowledge. So because school is still the temple of learning, and whatever is being told to the child in the school, for him it is always the last word. He will not be listening to the parents if the teachers are telling something. So now for this particular purpose, I personally feel that there was a big gap. That was the gap of the language. The language which is being used in the school is different from the language which was spoken at home. So this policy, as it has tried to bring in the culture of the multi language, because if the child wants to understand the society, or if he wants to connect with the larger society, then he should have the knowledge of that language to understand the culture, to understand the social problems, to understand the traditions of the different people around, and and also to express himself. So a multi language culture is a very good idea which is promoted here. And the second important thing is, uh, if you just go back to the history and see the history, where when the India was not independent, and lots of invaders, they came to India, and but who actually succeeded to reign over India was the East India Company or the Britishers. And when those Britishers, they tried to identify the secret of India's strength, that why the Indians, when so many invaders have come to this country, why these Indians, their lives are not affected at all, and why this country is still intact, and why this country is still flourishing. They found that every small village was self-reliant here. Here the systems were developed in the way that all the needs of the community were they were catered by everyone who is belonging to that community, and they were not requiring any outside person or any king or any officer to tell them that you have to manage your lives in this way. So they were amazed to see this kind of system in the society, and then they found that, okay, let us try to break the system, and they created the class who just left everything, and instead of being the manufacturer or the producer, they just became the passive worker who was sitting behind the desk with a paper and pencil in their hand. So that means somewhere we have to bring back this into the education, that education, real education, is actually the assimilation of the head, heart, and hand, and a perfect harmony between these three. It is not only hand which is important, it is not only head which is important. In fact, the harmony of these two, and along with our openness to accept others as it is, and to accept others with the open heart, that these kind of things need to be created. uh, the third is that when we talk about the perfect human being, when we talk about the holistic development, every person should be well aware of the problems which are existing in the society, and be able to develop in the way that they can understand those problems, and then they can take care of those problems. Now, how they can take care of those problems if they are not in habit of creating or innovating anything? So the kind of assessment pattern which we adopted, that our children, they were just vomiting out everything in the in those 3 hours, um, and then on the basis of that they are being tagged as the A grade learner or the B grade learner or something. Or so those kind of things need to be. There are many children who are very good problem solvers. India's jugaad technology is I don't find it redundant. I personally feel that jugaad technology is a sense of pride for all of us, that we know that how to find the solutions of all our problems. We will be making every effort, and we will be using all the resources which are available to us, and we will try to find the solution. So these kind of things need to find somewhere place in the formal education. We should be able to appreciate. I tell you that during this lockdown period, I got one very amazing information from one of my teachers. He said one of the child, he was not attending the classes, and when he called up the child, he said that I am busy doing my business. So, sir, I will be preparing for the examination in 1 or 2 months. Don't worry about that. But right now, I am busy with my own business. So he asked him what exactly you are doing, and what you want to be. So he was very interested in the cars, as the young generation today is, but it was not interest in buying new cars only. It was, he learned during this lockdown period, he learned to repair and to see all the vehicles very carefully, and he opened his own shop of this auto repair and all that, and he's earning well now. This kind of and then I tell the teacher that you must appreciate his efforts, because he has understood that what is my um,
Purpose.
duty at this particular, what is the purpose of my life and what I really likes. And I have got this opportunity to hone my skill in that particular direction. So that kind of self awareness and the self motivation needs to be inculcated in the children. So whenever we talk about the self directed learning, I think the self directed learning can come into the picture only when we learn to appreciate each and every aspect of the child's personality.
Good.
It
I
is
think well
not
said.
only,
Well
yeah,
said. But now I have to stop you because I need to move on. Otherwise,
yeah,
the topic is so interesting and so close to our heart that we can continue and move on. But I think what you have said is really good. That these the parents are also part of that entire conflict process, and I think that's why they are also important stakeholders within the school. But what I'm going to do is just, there's one thing that bothers me sometimes a lot, and I really want to get into that slightly. Is it that when we go out on the streets in India, okay, we see so many people disrespecting the civic sense. So in some sense, not lacking on civic sense. uh, and they love to double park. They would want to park closest to the shop that they are going into. They would not care about the inconveniences of other. It's a very common practice to just eat a banana and throw the peel anywhere on the road. We litter a lot, and that creates a big garbage problem. And in terms of civic sense, we lack as a country. And that is why we are very happy when we go to places like Singapore and find them to be very clean. And we are amazed as to why are they so clean. Either there are no Indians, or uh, or suddenly Indians behave differently. And that is actually true, because the moment you land at an airport outside India, you start behaving differently. You start finding that next trash can to put your trash in. uh, and apart from that, I think it's really important for us as schools to educate students in terms of civic sense, because they need to be part of the society. So, if Mrs. Revati, if you could possibly just elaborate slightly on that part, as to why it is important for us to create better citizens. I think Anita has touched on a few parts of it, but I still want to go deeper. How is it possible that all the children who are coming out of our schools are responsible citizens of India? And how do we do that?
Absolutely. I think, yes, I agree with all that you said. The first thing that I would say is that we must teach our children to take pride in everything that we have. That is particularly missing in our country. We're not proud of our school. We need to be proud. When they pass out and they become alumni, they say we are so proud of our school. But do they have that same sentiment while they are in school? Moments will come out when they feel and they say, oh my God, this is my best school. But they need to feel that every day. Then they won't be throwing a banana peel outside. Then they won't be taking a chocolate wrapper and or they won't be using bad language, or they won't be doing something which is not expected of them. I'm not saying that we need to be a very compliant country and we need to make them all so compliant that they are so restricted in their movement. Not at all. We must teach children to own up everything, because all of these belong to them and it is theirs. So, I always feel this: what is in store for me? If every child starts asking that question and he will get a whole lot of answers, he will start feeling more responsible. So, creating the sense of responsibility is very, very important. Creating a sense of ownership of every thing that one does, and be accountable for all of that, and the repercussions that may come should also be it. There was a time when if things were dirty and they used to ask students, pick it all up or clean it up. We've had that even in the Gurukul system. We've had that. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong in Shramdhan. But today it becomes an uproar. Okay, if you've just given a jhadu to a child, you had it. So I think that's where we are not teaching our children the dignity of labor. That's where it comes from. It's all right, but leave it. The bai will come and clear it. The pune will come and clear it. Why? You created it. You will clear it. The minute we say that, I am certain children will start becoming more responsible. So, creating a sense of responsibility, giving them the feeling of owning up that responsibility and ensuring that they are accountable for that, I think is something that we need to do. We need to give them projects which are based on these, where children learn to appreciate little things around them. I think that again, a culture of appreciation is what I would say, and that comes out of reflection. They need to have moments where they can reflect. We have children standing in the window, gaping blankly into the space. We tell them, "Why are you standing in the window? Kuch nahi karna hai kya?" So at home also, parents will say, don't you have to study? But let the child look out the window. For him, it is time to stand and stare, because it's time for him to reflect upon himself, the good doings and the bad. Both are important. He should also be able to observe people around them. When they go to Singapore, as you rightly said, they are more conscious of looking at the nearest bin so that they can put their wrapper inside. But why is it that they jump queues when they come to the counter inside our country, but over there they will stand patiently for us in queues? So I think talking to them is very important. Involving parents in the conversation is extremely important. We unfortunately communicate all of this as whatever we are trying to say to our children, but not always it goes to parents. Getting parents also, I do this in my school. When I tell parents, if your child's program is over, you cannot get up and go, because if you don't learn to appreciate some other child's program, your child will never learn to. And some other parent will not appreciate your child's program. So there is a rule that you have to stay put. So whether you like it or not, you're sitting there for an hour and a half appreciating other children also perform. I'm sure that they carry no regret with them after they have watched the program. And that's exactly what will happen to our children. The minute we say this, that you have to do this because it's for your good, I think it's important. Having a research project, making them do all of these, which is completely student driven, with the responsibility on them, is going to help us make them more responsible.
So I think you rightly put it that way, but there's still a question. So when I was in school, and and this is something I want to learn. So when I was at school, we used to have that SUPW periods, okay. And I remember that blind school was right across from my school in Delhi. So I went to DPS Mathura Road, and blind school was right there. And Cheshire Home used to be in Okla, very close by. And we as students were taken to Cheshire Home to work with you know disadvantaged people, and we also spent a lot of time in the blind school, working with kids there, reading them stories, etc. So these kind of activities, they happen in almost every school. Okay? And every school can boast of an almanac where they can write down that they do all these things. But somehow the result is not that we suddenly make students sensitive towards blind people. The result is not that we make them sensitive. The empathy that should have been raised, that doesn't really happen. So is it that schools need to do a little bit more than just fill their calendars with these kind of events? Is there something lacking in our, because see, if we don't question what is wrong, okay, I mean, we, all of us go around school and we hear every school is doing everything possible to do everything right, okay,
Yes.
but then why is the end result so different? Um, uh, and and that is the problem. So is it that even though we are considering these as activities and not part of a culture, and to inculcate a culture of respect towards others, irrespective of their physical, emotional, social condition, okay. As you rightly said, I mean, we have to treat a peon also. Tata, does that. J.R.D. Tata treats everybody in his company in a certain manner, but he's setting an example, right? And because he's setting an example, therefore other people are creating that culture in a school. So my question is that we always keep focusing on inculcating these values in our students. I'm going to ask you a tough question, all of you.
Yeah, absolutely
Do,
fine.
do our teachers have these values? Because if they are not the role models, right, then the students are not, the digital natives are not going to just hear you and do something. They have to observe you doing the same thing over and over again. If parents are always on the mobile and they are not respecting the PM, the child is not going to do that. If teacher does not give a damn about somebody who's physically challenged, the students are not going to do that, no matter how many activities we involve them. So when we talk about culture, is it a lot more than just doing activities? Revati, this is to you.
Yes, it is certainly. I think culture itself has to be a shared vision, shared action, and shared beliefs, shared assumptions. And all these are simply artifacts of a culture. When we say rural
Correct.
immersion program or a social service program or doing anything that would be for the benefit of the underprivileged, they're all artifacts, which means they stand as standalones. What I'm trying to say is that you need to build a culture of compassion, culture of empathy, and a culture of love in the school. And it just means that right from the top to the last person down needs to breathe that culture and needs to speak the same language, no matter what. So it requires a complete mindset and not change of mind. And also that parents also have to have the shared vision. It cannot be just with them. That's why you have in the school culture and big umbrella of the culture, school culture that we're talking about, you will have a kid culture, you will have a staff room culture, You'll have a culture inside the school. They're all subcultures, and the subcultures will be very different at different times. For people to breathe in, you need to have all of this as a part of your life. Only when,
Right.
just like how you brush your teeth, you don't ask everybody, do you brush your teeth? Do you brush your teeth? Do you brush your teeth? We didn't. We don't ask anybody because we assume everyone would have had a bath, we would have done that. That's exactly what we need to get into our schools. We need to get them to believe that this is a part of your life. Habits have to be formed, and that habits have to be regular habits. And
Yes,
these are all habits.
right.
Every activity that we do cannot be a standalone activity. And that is the reason why I love the NEP, which says there can be no distinction between co-curricular and curricular. They're all
Absolutely.
curricular. I think if you're teaching the children how to keep their surroundings clean or green, I think it's a part of the culture. It's a part of the curriculum that tells you environmentally you must be healthy. And I think that's very, very important.
And I think that's the reason why I asked you this question, because I wanted you to point this out, that just creating a calendar of activities does not define
Yes.
a culture. So thank you very much.
I
I'll,
think, can I
Atul,
just add one more thing? I
yeah,
want to scrap marks and grades out of this. The minute you do that, I think it'll become a part of one's
Sure,
lifestyle.
sure.
yes, I think that's a very valid point. I think we are giving too many marks and badges, and we are just recognizing students with the marks that they have. And if that the culture goes away, the culture of um, over emphasizing on assessment. But let me at this point bring in the person who made sure that we all engrossed in assessment for a very long time. So Bala
Dr.
sir,
Atul, can I add something?
yes, you can. It's a panel discussion. We can discuss anything that we want.
Yeah, because when Revti ji she was talking about, she's true, she's right that if the activities are the standalone activities, that then we cannot gain anything by organizing those activities. So I just want to share a small experience of mine that we always talk about the inclusive schools, inclusive cultures, and my school is a perfect example of the socially inclusive school. But when we started this program, then we got lots of parents. They were not very happy about it, and they raised lots of objection. But ultimately, you know what we did? We trained the children of every class. We trained every faculty member. We trained from the gate keeper to everybody inside the school was trained about their needs and about their habits, their personality aspects, everything. And when the students they started taking care of such children, and they felt that they are responsible and they can take good care of the children, then they trained their own parents. So now something has become the part of the school culture, and the whole scene is changed. So
Yes,
now everybody's trained for that. So I
I
think
yeah,
whenever any program is there, because you talked about the blind students and something, so
yes,
we are catering to the children with the multiple disabilities.
right.
And
I think it takes time for a culture to
yes,
be
but it takes
established,
time.
but it's repetitively doing the same thing over and over again, which creates a culture. So I am going to come to you with the last big question, and something that NEP wants to do. Now we keep talking about creating a problem-solving mindset. Okay, so that's also what NEP wants to accomplish. Now, this problem-solving mindset in a culture where um, we we have not. I would say we have been copycats for a very long time. India is known to be the world leader in copycatting. Maybe we are just second to China.
Correct.
And we take even the research we take from US and other places,
Yeah.
business models from other places. Reliance has jumped in after Amazon succeeded, and there are so many other examples that I can give from every field in our industry where we love to put the made in India stamp on something created by Germany. um, Now, in that bigger picture, in that bigger picture, how do we enable first our teachers to have a problem solving mindset, more importantly? Or maybe you can start from school leaders, because school leaders also need to be the biggest problem solver. Then the teacher has to be problem solver, and then we can expect that someday in 230 children would be problem solving. So how does a problem solving mindset work, since you have solved so many problems with CBSE?
Well, that's very true. I can write a history about that. But then, basically, problem solving requires a thinking skill, basically. And what has happened over the decades, we have given ourselves to what is called a linear thinking. This linear thinking is because of a cultural imposition, or because of greater acceptability, or because of a popularity that is being bestowed on you because you are part of the row. Okay, and therefore any decision, any approach to a problem which is slightly different is looked at with a negative view. Okay, so celebration of perceptions is not really, a part of the game in school system, right? And therefore, what seems to be important is that freedom of thinking is very, very important. And I always used to say in most of my program, one of the greatest curses to Indian education system is what is called the right answer syndrome, right? So the teacher believes this is what I have learned, right? And therefore you have got to do what I say what is right, right? It may be right, but there are other propositions also. In a very interesting brain research, it has been found out that the human brain can think about the same thing, by one followed by 10.23 million kilometers of typewriter zeros.
Wow.
एक के बाद 10.2 किलोमीटर तक जीरो डाल के अगर उसको पढ़ सकते हैं, उतनी तरह human brain can think about the same thing. But we want the people to think what I am thinking. So celebration of perceptions, right? Celebration of realities is a great threat to problem solving. Let me give a very interesting example to you. Way back, I was trained by the British Council for what is called project-oriented teaching in CBSE, science teaching. And we came back with a lot of open mind, and I started doing the program. And from the CBSE, we brought out a kind of a booklet, which was a kind of, examples by which, either in physics, chemistry, biology, you can do model projects. But you wouldn't believe, if you take the projects done by 1,000 students, you will find 990 students have copied from the book what has been given in the school board. Because we always want to be in the comfort zone, number one. The second is that, as an examiner, if I go, and I don't want to evaluate the differing perception of the child, right? Therefore, we always expect the children to be good followers than great leaders, right? And that's where the entire problem comes in, right? And I think I have already quoted the story of Niels Bohr, right? In my platform, for this, I might repeat for the goodness of the audience, that when a teacher of class 6 goes to, physics teacher goes to the class, and in the examination, he asks a question: how would you measure the height of a building using a barometer, right? And the barometer is meant for measuring the pressure, right? All the students write something, and one of the students writes answers, and the teacher awards him 0 out of 10, right? And the examiner says that you are wrong, but the child says my answer is right, and there was an argument, and there was a provision for the arbitrator who will decide who is right or wrong. So the arbitrator comes and calls this boy and gives him 5 minutes time before which he will write the correct answer. And after 5 minutes, he comes with a blank paper, right? And the arbitrator say, hey, you seem to be a mischievous boy, you don't know the answer. The boy smiles and says, that's not true, sir. I know many answers, but I don't know which answer you want, right? And then what happens is that the teacher, the arbitrator asks, what are the answers? He gives 5, 6 answers which are absolutely right at this point of time. I'm told that he was Niels Bohr, the Nobel laureate over there. So the question basically is, we have not got a Nobel Prize. We have not got people who are thinking innovatively just because we want to control the thinking of our children through our thinking. That is a problem. And that's because my teachers are also controlled by the leaders of the schools that you have got to do this way. Right? I know so many primary teachers who are highly innovative, I can do, but we all have to fall in line with what I want, what the management wants. I think that is a tragedy of this country, that we need to move beyond the linear thinking in order to facilitate the competencies of the brain and the way perceptions can be celebrated in this country. We have lived what Anita ji was talking about, the culture, right? The Indian culture was nothing but celebration of perceptions. If you see all kinds of festivals, month January to December, it was only to facilitate the economy of the country to different types of laborers who were there and using it.
Please do not stress on them matching the answer at the back of the book. It doesn't really matter whether the answer matches or no. What matters is how the child thought while solving the problem. So if the child can explain the thinking of getting to the wrong question, but the thinking is good, give him marks, because he's thinking right. The answer may be wrong. One day he'll get to the right answer as long as he keeps thinking. And that is how problem solvers will be created. We are usually very punctual with our times, and for some reason, we had very interesting conversation. Maybe the topic that we took was very deep, and we were all passionate about it. So I apologize that I might not be able to take up the questions in this session, but hopefully, you would have really heard different perspectives. We have covered all the 3 parts. And I want to thank all of my participants to join us on this wonderful journey of keeping to have conversations on education. Next week, we are going to be talking about learner-centric pedagogy. That is also one of the things that is going to be very important as we move ahead into the next decade, as rightly, we heard today also. Because the education is going to be learner-centric. So what exactly is learner-centric pedagogy? We'll discuss that next week. And I thank you, all my panelists, for sharing their views. Revati ji, thank you very much. Anita, thanks a lot. And Bala sir, always you're looking handsome in that wonderful t-shirt.
Oh, that's what was given by you.
So I had to somehow mention the ICSL t-shirt in the end, right? So so I think, thank you very much for being here. Lovely evening. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you back on Friday at 5 next week. Same time, same place, on your computer, having a great conversation on education. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, all of you. Bye-bye.